He parked in my spot for 3 weeks. So I made one legal move he'll regret forever. The first morning I saw his car in my spot felt like waking up to find a stranger drinking from my mug. I stood there with my coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the glossy coupe parked on the thick white line my father once measured with a carpenter's ruler. The number stenciled at the curb matched my lease and my mailbox, and the little brass plate on my door. It matched the memory of my dad squinting in the afternoon sun, telling me, "Boundaries are the paint on the world, kid. Once they blur, people pretend they never existed." I waited. Maybe he was a guest. Maybe he'd pop out and say sorry. He didn't. At 8:10, I left a polite note under his wiper. Nothing dramatic, just, "Reserved for Unit 3B. Please don't use. Thanks." And jogged to the bus stop because I was late. That night, the coupe was still there. It wore my note like a joke. A wink stuck under its eyelash. "Day 2, I asked around. The super shrugged. The new HOA head, a tidy man who spoke like an automated phone menu, told me enforcement was in transition because the tow company contract had lapsed and the signs were out of compliance with a new ordinance. He promised a meeting soon. The word soon felt like someone pushing a problem behind a couch and calling the room clean. On day 3, I met the driver. He arrived with the sideways posture of a person who assumes space is his default setting. Phone in hand, sunglasses even in shade, wristwatch that flashed like a fish. He popped the trunk and ignored me until I said, "Hey man, that's my spot." He glanced at the white number, then at me. "There's no name on it," he said. His voice was pleasant in the way of a customer service email that says no. I introduced myself and pointed to the building's parking plan app on my phone, where the grid clearly labeled the spaces. He looked bored. "You can take the open one next to the dumpster," he suggested, like he was doing me a favor. I work late. I kept my voice even. Coming home to an open space near the dumpster isn't the same as having the spot I pay for. He smiled in a way that never touched his eyes and said, "I'm Trent. Nice to meet you." As if that settled anything. He closed his trunk gently, like a door closing on my sentence, and walked inside. That night, I started documenting. I took photos with timestamps. Morning, noon, and after dark. I filed a complaint through the HOA portal that crashed twice before accepting attachments smaller than a memory. I sent a polite email and then a firmer one, copying the manager. I didn't swear. I didn't threaten. I kept hearing Dad's voice. "Don't get messy, get accurate." By the end of the week, I'd learned the language of small wars. Limited common element. Exclusive use. Interference. I learned which neighbors raise their blinds when they hear voices in the lot, and which ones film with their phones. I learned that my building's violation notices might as well be postcards if there's no way to escalate them. I also learned that Trent had a talent for arriving when I was leaving, and leaving when I was arriving, which meant a dozen awkward conversations in the span of 3 days. He was never rude enough to quote. He was only dismissive enough to remember. On day 8, I tried the tow company directly. The dispatcher asked about signage and authority. I sent her a photo of the peeling red sign that said, "Unoth vehicles will be towed at owner's expense." The phone number faded to an 8 that could have been a 3. She sighed, a sound that came all the way through the speaker like the hiss of an old radiator. "We can't touch it if the HOA isn't contracted with us and the sign's not up to code. You'd win a fight and we'd lose one." That night I sat in my car, engine off, hand on the ridge of paint my father had taped and rolled 2 summers before he died. I could feel the texture through my skin, a whisper under the tint of the dusk. He'd been meticulous, kneeling with blue tape and pencil marks, making the lines straight because straight lines are a promise you keep with other people. He wasn't a lawyer. He just believed in the math of fairness. If you pay for a thing, you should have the thing. I tried to be reasonable again. I caught Trent on his patio when he was filming a story against the golden hour, smoothing his hair with the heel of his hand. "Look," I said, "I've done everything I can to be decent about this. The HOA's working on the tow signs. You've parked there for over a week. I need my spot." He lifted his phone and included me in his frame like I was scenery. I stepped out of view. He lowered the phone, annoyed I wouldn't play the part. "I hear you," he said, the way people say it at work when they want the conversation to be over. "But there's nowhere else." "There are 20 guest spots," I said. "Full of guests," he said without looking. "Anyway, my dad used to be HOA. Everyone knows me. It's not a big deal." He winked as if the building itself had told him bedtime stories. The manager finally sent a note the next morning. They'd issue a formal warning, and once the contract was re-signed, the car would be subject to towing. "Please be patient." The phrase made me laugh in the kitchen, alone, the kind of laugh that tastes like metal. The warning appeared under his windshield wiper at noon. By 6 p.m., it had drifted into the gutter like a leak. By 9 p.m., there were 2 beer bottles standing at attention behind his rear tire, the casual cairns of a tailgate. I took more photos. I documented the Uber receipts and the one time I paid cash for a ride because my phone died and the driver refused to stop to charge it. So I was late, and the supervisor wrote me up. I rented a space in a private garage for a week at a rate that felt like paying ransom for the privilege of not circling the block after midnight. I stacked the receipts in neat chronological humiliation. On day 14, I showed Trent the stack. Not like a threat, like a weather report. "This is what it's costing me," I said. "You're not going to move, are you?" He glanced at the paper, then at the car, then at me, calculating the shortest path through a problem that wasn't his. "I'm out of town this weekend," he said. "If I move it, I'll lose my spot." I almost laughed because it was my spot he claimed he'd lose. "You can talk to HOA," he added, already scrolling his phone. I have. I could hear my voice flatten into the thing my father called courtroom calm. "They're stalled. I'm done waiting." He leaned back against the warm hood and looked at me like a teacher humoring a student. "Done waiting for what?" "For you to respect a boundary." The words surprised me by how quiet they were. I wasn't yelling. I was tired down to the bones that anchor your posture. He slid his sunglasses up even though the sun was low enough to forgive naked eyes. His smile sharpened. "Okay," he said, all syllables sweet and empty. "Then do something about it." "I will." There was a small pause in which the whole lot felt like it inhaled. A bird scissored the sky. Somewhere a dryer vent exhaled warm, lint-scented air. He tapped the hood twice with his knuckles, a sound like knocking on a door you already own. "Be my guest," he said. And then, for the first time since this started, he let the bone of his attitude show through the skin. He tilted his head, measured me for sport, and added with a little laugh, "Sue me." I didn't sleep much after that exchange. His smirk lingered in my head like the aftertaste of spoiled milk. Sue me. It wasn't just arrogance. It was an invitation. A dare he thought I'd never have the guts to accept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, hearing my dad's voice in memory. "Don't get messy. Get accurate." The next morning I called my friend Adam, who had just finished law school and was clerking. He laughed when I told him the story. Not at me. At the predictability of it. "Classic interference with easement," he said, like it was vocabulary practice. I didn't understand the phrase, but I understood the calm way he said it. He asked me to gather everything. Photos, receipts, my lease agreement, the HOA bylaws, the rental garage contract, even the Uber rides I had to take. He said, "You don't need to out-yell him, just out-document him." So I did. I pulled every record like I was building a brick wall. I found the page in my purchase packet where the deed listed the parking spot as a limited common element assigned to my unit. I requested a signed letter from the HOA manager confirming the assignment. I printed the email trail, complete with the automatic ticket numbers and the "please be patient" replies. I took screenshots of Trent's car every day, circling the date and time like a detective building a murder board. The strangest part was how clinical it felt. I wasn't boiling with rage anymore. I was cold, almost detached. Anger had burned itself out and left only the bone structure of determination. When I handed Adam the folder, he flipped through it with approving nods. "This is solid. You've quantified damages, shown repeated trespass, and built a timeline. If he wanted you to do something, well, here it is." That night, I ran into Ms. Ortega, the elderly neighbor who had lived there longer than anyone. She saw the stack of papers under my arm and asked what I was doing. When I explained, she smiled with the slow sadness of someone who's seen this cycle before. "I remember your father painting that spot," she said, "on a Saturday with a level, making sure the edges were straight. He told me, it's not about the paint. It's about people knowing where not to step." She went back inside and returned with an old photo album. There it was, a faded picture of me as a teenager, holding the paint bucket while Dad crouched at the curb. She pressed it into my hands. "Take this with you. Remind them it's more than asphalt." 2 days later, the clerk at the small claims court took my filing fee and stamped the case number across my complaint. My heart pounded like I'd just signed up for a marathon without training. I imagined Trent's laugh when he saw the papers, the way he'd post about it to his followers, turning it into content. But I also imagined a judge looking at my photos, my receipts, my father's meticulous lines, and seeing the truth that Trent thought was beneath him. The process server caught him outside the building one afternoon. I wasn't there, but a neighbor told me she saw him unfold the papers, laugh out loud, and toss them onto his passenger seat. That night, his car was still in my spot. He hadn't moved it an inch. If anything, he parked more aggressively, angled slightly across the line as though to emphasize ownership. But the first tiny crack in his armor showed. I saw him in the lobby a few days later, and for the first time he didn't stop to chat or smirk. He kept his sunglasses on, phone pressed to his ear, muttering into it as if shielding himself with a call. He avoided eye contact. Adam told me that was normal. Bullies love the stage. They hate paperwork. He coached me on what to expect. He'd probably try to delay, Maybe not even show up the first time. Don't lose steam. Judges respect consistency. You have the receipts, literally. That night, I sat in my car again, hand on the painted line, photo of my dad on the dashboard. I whispered, "I'm doing it, Dad. I'm not letting him erase what you made." The lot was quiet except for the clicking metal of cooling engines. Across the row, Trent's coupe gleamed under the security light like a predator lounging in the open. 3 weeks had stretched into 4. The HOA still shrugged, neighbors still complained under their breath but did nothing, and Trent still strutted like gravity bent differently for him. But something had changed. This time, when I looked at his car, I didn't feel powerless. I felt patient, almost calm. The papers were in motion, the wheels of the system grinding slowly but surely. When I finally closed my blinds that night, I smiled to myself for the first time in weeks. He had told me to sue him. Now I had. And whether he laughed or ignored it, the clock was ticking. Not for me, but for him. The first court date arrived faster than I thought it would. I took the morning off work, my folder tucked under my arm, my stomach tight with caffeine and nerves. The courthouse wasn't grand. It was a squat brick building that smelled faintly of copier toner and disinfectant. But to me it felt like a stage. I sat on a wooden bench waiting for Trent to swagger in with his sunglasses and smirk, except he didn't. His name was called, my case number read aloud, and the clerk looked around the room. Empty. The judge, an older woman with kind but sharp eyes, frowned. Defendant not present. Will reschedule with notice. My relief evaporated. A delay. Exactly what Adam had predicted. When we finally did meet in that room, a week later, Trent strolled in 10 minutes late, wearing a blazer too flashy for the setting, his phone in his hand until the bailiff told him to put it away. He nodded at me with a grin, like we were old friends catching up over coffee. I didn't nod back. The judge asked us to present our cases. Trent went first. He didn't bring anything. No photos, no receipts, not even a copy of the HOA bylaws, just his confidence. He told the court it wasn't really my spot, that everyone parked everywhere, that I was overreacting. His voice was smooth, but his arguments were smoke, dissipating the moment he stopped speaking. Then it was my turn. I opened my folder. I slid out the photos, one by one, each timestamp. I showed the rideshare receipts, the rental garage invoices, the write-up from my boss for being late after a missed train. I held up the HOA's confirmation letter and my deed page with the parking space listed in black ink. I even showed the faded photo of my father painting the line, though I didn't linger on it. I just let it sit on the bench. Quiet testimony to continuity. The judge listened without interruption. When I finished, she turned to Trent. "Do you have any evidence to submit?" He shifted in his chair. "I mean, everyone knows that spot's—" She cut him off, her voice firm but calm. "Do you have any documents?" He spread his hands and gave a little laugh that was meant to charm. It didn't. The judge's eyes hardened. "This is a court, not social media. Please take this seriously." For the first time, I saw him falter. His jaw worked. He sat down too quickly, like someone trying to hide defeat. The ruling didn't come instantly. She took a short recess. I stood in the hallway staring at the vending machines until Adam joined me, clapping my shoulder. "You did perfectly," he said. "Short, precise, backed by paper. That's how you win." When we went back in, the judge read the decision clearly. Trent was liable for trespass and interference with exclusive use. He owed me reimbursement for the documented costs, plus filing fees. It wasn't a fortune, but it was validation. Every Uber ride, every late-night garage rental, every ounce of frustration now had a line item and a price. Trent sat stiffly, his face pale under the overhead lights. He didn't look at me when the judge banged her gavel. He just muttered something under his breath and shoved his chair back hard enough to screech against the tile. But Adam wasn't finished. As we walked out, he leaned close and said softly, "This isn't just about a check. We can record this judgment, a lien. It'll sit there until he pays, like a lock on his property. He won't be able to sell or refinance without dealing with you first." The idea made me pause in the hallway. I pictured Trent's coupe gleaming arrogantly in my space. I pictured his smirk when he told me to sue him. And then I pictured the invisible weight of a legal lien, chained to him, following him into every financial conversation until he faced what he'd done. That night, back at the apartment, his car was still in my spot. He hadn't moved it, maybe out of spite. Maybe because he thought the judgment was just words on paper. I stood there under the yellow glow of the lot lights, my father's photo in my pocket, and whispered to myself, one step at a time. The paint holds, the lines stay. The judgment was mine. The next step would be making it count. Filing the lien turned out to be strangely anticlimactic. After weeks of stress and photos and hearings, the actual process was just paperwork. A form, a small fee, and a clerk who stamped it without so much as glancing at me twice. But walking out of that office, I felt a different kind of power. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and heavy, like a chain laid across Trent's future. Back home, I invested in something I should have bought weeks earlier. A locking bollard. The HOA, emboldened now that the judgment was on record, approved it instantly. They even reimbursed part of the cost from legal compliance funds. The next Saturday, I bolted it into the concrete. The clang of metal echoed off the walls of the garage. For the first time in a month, I slid my car into my spot and felt peace. Trent didn't come to me directly, but his behavior shifted. He tried to talk to the HOA board, raising his voice in meetings about how unfair the rules were. He made a show of circling the lot at night, headlights sweeping my windows like searchlights, before parking far away. He posted vague rants online about snakes who weaponize paperwork, but he couldn't touch me. The bollard stood solid. The lien sat quietly in county records, and I simply went about my life. Weeks passed. I started sleeping normally again. The photo of my dad painting the line remained in my glove box, but I didn't need to look at it every night anymore. Boundaries, I realized, don't need constant defending once they're reinforced. Then, nearly a year later, the letter arrived. A thick envelope from a title company I'd never heard of, asking me to kindly execute a release of judgment lien because the owner of Unit 5A-Trent was in contract to sell. My pulse quickened as I read it. Without my signature, the sale couldn't close. An hour later, my phone rang. A brisk, harried voice introduced herself as Trent's real estate agent. She was all smiles over the phone, sugar, and urgency. "We just need you to sign a quick release so the sale can go through. Nothing complicated. It's just a formality." "Not quite," I said. "He hasn't paid me." A pause. Then her tone sharpened. "Well, surely you don't want to hold up his whole transaction over, what, a couple $1,000s? We can maybe offer you a goodwill payment to move this along." I laughed, not cruelly, just softly. "The court order specifies the amount, plus interest, plus filing costs. I'll accept nothing less." That evening, I spotted Trent in the lobby for the first time in months. He didn't smirk this time. His eyes slid away from mine. He muttered something to the realtor walking beside him. His posture wasn't loose or confident anymore. It was tight, hunched, like he was bracing against a storm. For the first time since he'd stolen my space, I felt taller. Not because I'd beaten him, but because I'd finally stopped letting him shrink me. My dad had been right. Once the lines are painted, they mean something. And this time, the law itself was the paint. Permanent and undeniable. But the best part wasn't the check I knew was coming. It was that tiny flicker in Trent's expression. The realization that one small legal move he had laughed off was now the chain around his ankle. And I was the only one with the key. The realtor called again 2 days later, her voice tighter now, stripped of its sugary gloss. "We really need to resolve this quickly," she said. "The buyers are threatening to walk. Couldn't you be flexible? Maybe reduce the amount, just to move things along?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of receipts still clipped neatly in my folder. Flexible. That word had been shoved down my throat from the beginning. Be patient, be reasonable, be flexible. I thought of Trent leaning against my car, sunglasses on, telling me to sue him. I thought of waiting for Ubers in the rain, my manager frowning as I walked in late again. The sick knot in my chest every night I circled the block looking for parking. Flexibility was what he had counted on. "I'll accept exactly what the court awarded," I said. "Not a cent less. With interest. And you'll cover the fee for filing the lien release, too." She sighed sharply, muttered something about unreasonable, and hung up. That night, Trent himself finally approached me. He was waiting in the lobby, hands jammed into the pockets of a jacket I'd never seen him wear before. He looked different. Smaller somehow, like the edges of his confidence had frayed. "You happy now?" he asked, his voice low and raw. "I just want what I was owed," I replied. "It was a parking spot, man. A spot. You dragged me through court for this?" "You dragged yourself," I said evenly. 3 weeks in my space, months ignoring notices, laughing at me when I asked. "You told me to sue you, so I did." He winced at that, like the words stung more than he expected. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. His jaw twitched, his mouth opened halfway, but instead he said, "You'll regret this. I'll find a way to get around you." I didn't even raise my voice. "No, you won't. That's the point." For the first time in this whole ordeal, he didn't have a comeback. He just shook his head and walked out into the night. The next week dragged. His car was gone from the lot most nights. I guessed he was staying elsewhere. The realtor called again, her tone clipped and professional now. "Funds are being wired to satisfy the judgment in full, including interest and fees. Once you confirm receipt, please sign and return the release." When the check arrived, it felt surreal. I held it in my hands at the kitchen table. The ink fresh, the numbers precise. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was validation. Every sleepless night, every ignored email, every smirk. It was all accounted for, neatly converted into dollars and cents. I signed the release and mailed it back, imagining Trent's fury as the transaction finally cleared. He had probably told himself right up until the last minute that he could slip out of it, charm his way around it, talk someone into letting him off the hook, but he couldn't, not this time. When I parked in my spot that evening, I sat there for a long time, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at the clean white lines my father had painted years ago. They had held, just like he promised. I whispered into the stillness of the garage, boundary respected, and for the first time in months, I let myself feel the weight lift. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't over for Trent. The lien was gone, yes. But the lesson would follow him. The next time he tried to bluff through rules, someone would know to check the record, to look closer, to doubt the smile. And that, more than the money, was the kind of justice I hadn't expected to find. The wire cleared, the lien was lifted, and the title company sent me a polite confirmation letter. On paper, it was all finished. But the satisfaction didn't come from the money or even from the official release. It came later, in smaller, quieter moments. A week after the sale closed, I saw a moving truck in front of Trent's building. He was there, directing the movers with clipped words, his usual swagger dim. He didn't look at me when I walked past, though I know he saw me. His car was gone, sold maybe, or parked somewhere he didn't want me to see. The spot next to mine sat empty, like a wound finally closing. That night, when I pulled into my space, the bollard clicked down smoothly and the lines gleamed under the garage lights. I shut off the engine and just sat there, staring at the paint. My father's words echoed in the stillness. Boundaries are the paint on the world, kid. Once they blur, people pretend they never existed. I traced the faded photograph in my wallet with my thumb, the one Ms. Ortega had given me of Dad painting this very line. For the first time, the memory didn't sting. It steadied me. Weeks passed. Life slipped back into rhythm. I worked, I parked, I slept, without replaying arguments in my head. Ms. Ortega waved to me from her balcony sometimes, her smile knowing. The garage was quiet again. No taunting headlights, no sideways smirks, no bottle caps behind someone else's tires. Just neighbors respecting their spaces. Months later, over coffee with Adam, I mentioned I'd heard through the grapevine that Trent hadn't landed where he wanted. The sale had closed, sure, but he'd been forced into a cheaper condo out in the suburbs. Leon scared off his lender too, Adam said. They dug deeper and found other debts. Happens a lot. You were just the first domino. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. It wasn't joy I felt, but something calmer, heavier, like justice settling into place. One evening, almost a year to the day after all this began, I came home late. The garage was nearly empty. I lowered the bollard, eased my car into place, and killed the engine. The silence wrapped around me. I looked at that clean, narrow strip of white paint my father had laid down with such care, and I whispered, "Thanks, Dad. You were right." Not about winning or losing, not about money or courtrooms, but about the simple truth that boundaries matter. And if you don't defend them, someone will erase them. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need him humiliated or ruined. All I needed was the line to mean something again. And it did.